All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Um, as people join, they can follow along. We are going to be recording this, so if you miss a portion, you can always go back and check it. So I'm going to start off. My name's Corey Pitts. I'm the project manager with the Department of Transportation and the Division of Transportation Engineering. And we'll get to some of the other staff when we get to the introductions, but I want to welcome everyone to our US 29 Mobility and Reliability Study virtual public workshop. All right, there we go. Just a couple of notes about the meeting. This is one of our first virtual meetings. We've done a handful of these during this time, so we are still learning. So please bear with us, and we'll actually probably be seeking some feedback from those who participated following this on things that you thought went well and what we could improve upon. I am going to go over some of the basic controls to help you use the Zoom meeting format before we start the presentation. And just a quick note, as I mentioned, we are recording the meeting. So if you do turn on your video or audio, it will be captured in the recording. If you don't wish to have your voice or likeness recorded, you can turn off your video camera, which we've asked everyone to do, and submit your questions via the chat window. So let's get you oriented to the Zoom meeting. So everyone is on mute. You cannot unmute yourself. We can unmute you during the Q&A sessions. And when you would like to speak, we ask that you please use the raise hand feature, which we'll go over in just a couple minutes. If you have just called in by telephone and haven't called in via your computer, the way to unmute yourself is using the *6 feature. So the video, we've asked everyone to keep their video camera off. It starts off by default. We'd like to reduce the bandwidth of the meeting. So we ask that you don't turn on your camera during the meeting, just so that we can not overwhelm everyone's internet this evening. If you have a question during the meeting, you can send it via the chat. In order to send a chat, click the chat at the bottom of the menu. It's down at the bottom of the screen there. A new window will appear. It defaults to everyone, but you can use the drop-down menu to find and select Kyle Lucas. He's our chat monitor, and you can type those questions, and Kyle will be keeping track of those questions for us throughout the evening and popping in periodically to break up the presentation and submit some of those questions. So. Raising your hand. So when we get to the Q&A sessions of the presentation, we ask that you raise your hand, and that way we can recognize you and unmute you. In order to raise your hand, you'll click the participants window at the bottom of the menu. A new window will appear that will show the participants, and then we ask that you click the blue raise your hand feature. That will indicate to us that someone has raised their hand. Again, if you've dialed in by phone and you're not using the computer, you can raise your hand via the phone by using the *9 buttons. So in terms of the view, to change your view so that you only see the people with the cameras on and don't see a bunch of black boxes with names associated with it, you can click the up arrow next to the Start Video button and select the video settings. And then in those settings, there's a button that you can click that says hide non-video participants. And you'll want to check that box. And when you check that box, all those black boxes for people who don't have the cameras on should disappear, and you'll just see those individuals with their cameras on. So here's my contact information. Again, my name's Corey Pitts. I'm the project manager. There's my phone number, email address, and address. I would just note that, if you are going to reach out to me, most of our staff are working remotely, and that includes myself. So email is a much easier way to get in touch with me. I do periodically check my voicemail and mail, but if you want a quick response, email is the best way. I will have the contact information up later in the evening, so if you missed it, don't worry about it. So in terms of the agenda, we've covered the first 10 minutes. We've gone over the Zoom features. We're not going to have everyone introduce themselves, but I did want to go through and do some quick introductions of staff that are here, and then we'll get into the meeting presentation, about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how quickly we get through it and how many questions we get during the course of the presentation. And then the remainder of the meeting up until 8:30 will be for questions and answers. So we do have a number of staff here from MCDOT, as well as our engineering consulting firms, Mead and Hunt and STV. Again, the two people you'll primarily be hearing from this evening are myself and Paul Silberman. He's one of our consultants showing up on the video. But I have, looking at the participant list, we have a number of other DOT staff from our traffic division, from our director's office, our division of transportation engineering. I've seen some staff pop up from park and planning, as well as SHA. So with that, we'll jump right into the presentation. So I did want to, I know this is tied to the Flash project, but not directly related to the Flash project, but I did want to give a quick update on where the US 29 Flash project is. We have received all of the buses that have been purchased as part of that project. So all 16 buses have been delivered. They've been inspected and accepted by our Division of General Services, and driver training has actually already started on them. So that's a picture of the bus in the upper left image. The 10 Capital Bike Share stations that were also purchased as part of the project have been installed, and they've been activated as of May of this year. And we've actually seen some reasonable usage on those stations, despite the fact that the Flash service is not running. So people are using the bike share stations to get around the neighborhoods in between different destinations. Construction does continue. If you've driven the corridor, you've seen the construction going on. We did experience some delays associated with COVID-19. These were primarily on the production and delivery of products side of things. The construction wasn't really impacted by the pandemic, but some of the materials that were being manufactured and fabricated were impacted. So that's stretched out our schedule a little longer than we had anticipated. But we do expect substantial construction to be complete as of this summer. And the goal as of now, barring any other unforeseen circumstances relating to the pandemic, is that the service would start sometime this fall, likely in the October timeframe. So in terms of the presentation agenda, we're going to go over study purpose and goals, touch on existing conditions, dive into the alternatives that were studied, the results of the analysis that was performed on those alternatives, touch on the proposed recommendations, and then go into next steps. So the purpose of the study is to identify improvements on the US 29 corridor to complement the investment in the US 29 Flash project from Tech Road to the Silver Spring Transit Center, with the goals of improving corridor travel time and reliability for all users, not just the transit users. This includes bikes, drivers, and increase pedestrian and bicycle access and safety to the stations, as well as within and along the corridor. In terms of the schedule, we're still very early in terms of the overall schedule for a project such as this. We're in what we would call facility planning phase 1, where we're really just examining alternatives and trying to identify the project that would move forward into more detailed engineering. At the conclusion of this phase of the study, the findings of the analysis, the comments that we received from the public will be shared with the planning board as well as the county council. And at that time, county council may choose to identify a recommended alternative or alternatives to advance into more detailed engineering. All of that would be funding dependent. In facility planning phase 2, more detailed engineering and investigations would occur relating to surveys, right-of-way, environmental assessments, and final concepts would be developed. And at the conclusion of that stage, an ask for funding would be submitted to move the project into final design and construction if it was deemed to be a project that the county wanted to move forward with. Throughout all of these processes, there'd be numerous opportunities for public engagement. And I will note that at this time, no funding has been identified for facility planning phase 2 final design or construction. So at the conclusion of this work product, there is no further work identified at this time, but that's not to say that more couldn't occur when we do receive funding. We have done stakeholder participation throughout the life of the project. We've engaged with the corridor advisory committees early on in the project for the US 29 BRT corridor. We did hold an open house back in November of 2018 when the project was just getting started. And then again, this virtual workshop this evening. We've also engaged our partner agencies at various points along the project. So those would be individuals and staff from parking planning, MDOT-SHA, as well as MDOT-MTA. So I did want to touch on some of the comments that we received from the first workshop. I know it was a while ago, but we went through and categorized the comments. We received about 70 comments at that first workshop. The majority of those comments were tied to or related to traffic congestion, with a second grouping relating to the BRT lane location. So those would be comments about whether it should be in the median, should be in the curb, where it should be. There were also a number of comments about roadway design, signal operations, and then just general operations. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Paul. He's going to talk through the existing conditions, the alternatives, and our results.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks to everyone for attending tonight. Your interest in the project. We're very much looking to forward to your input and feedback. So I want to start with some numbers for the project, the corridor, and just to give kind of a framework for some of the existing conditions as we move into alternatives and results of our analysis. So, you know, we have some information on daily, peak hour, and rush hour, or peak period and rush hour directional traffic volumes. So we have several thousand pedestrians that are moving through the corridor on a daily level. Much of that focused down inside the Beltway in the Silver Spring downtown area. Not a lot of bicycle traffic, but we actually have a tremendous amount of bus passengers. In fact, almost 8,000 a day, and up to 800 in the peak direction, southbound in the morning and northbound in the evening. We have a lot of car traffic, you know, obviously this being a expressway type roadway as you head north towards the northern end of the corridor, about 3,000 to 4,000 in a single direction during rush hour. And when we did some surveys, we found a really good propensity for carpooling. That during rush hour, we found that you know, some cars had multiple occupants in them. So this really frames out, you know, how the corridor is being used. And when you add up the carpoolers and the bus passengers, you know, it really is, you know, 20 to 25% of the total traffic on the road. So that is something we definitely noted and considered in developing the alternatives and how to, you know, develop some bus priority options to move more people. Next slide. So again, this is some observed data that we did from various sources and traveling the corridor. This is roughly from Tech Road to Georgia Avenue in downtown Silver Spring. So of course today you have express bus service, you have local bus service, and you have regular passenger car traffic. And it takes about 25 to 30 minutes for passenger cars and express buses to get through that part of the corridor in the morning, a little bit less heading south, a little bit less in the outbound direction heading north. In the evening, a little under 20 minutes to just over 20 minutes for cars and buses. Next slide. So the again, just to reframe the existing conditions, this study actually reviewed and synthesized over 36 previous studies from the past several decades. These were studies specifically related to transit and BRT, conducted by the county, state highway, MTA. There were also US 29 standalone traffic studies, countywide and regional transit studies for the BRT network, functional master plans such as the bicycle master plan. All of these recommendations were synthesized to see what type of improvements would be relevant to evaluate for this study. Next slide. So what we developed in terms of alternatives that we evaluated are several what we call corridor-wide alternatives, and then several spot improvements and demand management improvements. So starting with the corridor level alternatives, we had a full-time dedicated median bus lane alternative that ran from Tech Road all the way down to approximately Sligo Creek Parkway. And this was the alternative as was developed by members of the CAC committee. So we really took this whole cloth and evaluated it in this study as one of the alternatives. Another corridor-wide alternative that we developed was called a managed lane alternative, and that consisted of special bus and HOV lanes at different times of the day, such as rush hour, in different directions, such as the inbound and outbound direction. And that generally ran from Musgrove Road to Spring Street. And we have some illustrative cross sections on that. And also a bus on shoulder alternative that would run north of Musgrove Road, similar as it does today. So those were the two independent corridor wide alternatives for bus priority. Then we looked at a series of intersection improvements at selected intersections and interchanges where there was a lot of traffic congestion and bottlenecks, really the goal there being that a rising tide moves all, lifts all boats, so that if you improve general traffic, the buses would also benefit. And then a suite of transportation system management and demand management strategies intended to reduce non-recurring congestion such as crashes and encourage carpooling and other alternative modes of travel. And lastly, we developed a suite of pedestrian and bicycle improvements, new infrastructure, to really double down on the investment that the county is making in the flash stations, specifically to increase the ability to walk or bike to those stations. And those were at the stations from Tech Road down to Silver Spring. So to increase that walk up, bike up ridership for the flash service that the county is investing in. Next slide. So how did we evaluate these alternatives? We looked primarily at three quantitative metrics. First of all, person throughput. How many people does it move through the corridor? And the travel time, how long does it take for each mode to get through the corridor, meaning cars or buses? The traditional traffic engineering metric of intersection and segment level of service and delay. And lastly, a qualitative impact assessment on neighborhood traffic impact. It was absolutely our goal of this study to not create alternatives that would result in motorists seeking alternative routes through neighborhood side streets. We really wanted to keep the traffic on 29 and keep it moving. And I hope you'll see that our analysis and alternatives bear that out. Next slide. So just a little bit about the future traffic. We developed long-range traffic projections out to about 25 years. And those were using the county's travel forecasting model and assumptions about growth in households and jobs and population in the corridor. In more detail, this is in the report, as well as detailed level of service maps for every segment and every intersection are in the report. We encourage you, if you're interested, to go and dig it out. And I will reiterate, as Corey mentioned, the study's been going on for a couple of years now. All of our data was pre-COVID. All of our existing data was pre-COVID. So we're not out there collecting any data and making predictions based on what's happening during this unusual time. So about if there was no action taking in this corridor, and again, knowing that this project is really aimed to address, long-term transportation improvements, investments in the corridor. If you did nothing, 15 intersections would be forecasted to fail level of service E or F in at least one rush hour. 21 segments would be forecast to fail in at least one rush hour. Travel times for vehicles would nearly double in the morning, particularly in the southbound direction. And transit travel time, the express bus or flash would increase by 10 minutes in the peak direction. And that's largely because, they're still allowed, if there was no action, the buses would still be allowed to use the shoulders as they do today in sections north of the ICC and 650. Next slide. So I'm seeing a couple questions pop up. I'll stop for the chat moderator to see if there's any quick answers we can give now before I get into the alternative cross sections.
Sure. So we got two questions that came in. The first is, will this median bus lane mean removing median from Sligo to Four Corners?
So I'd like to go through these slides to kind of show you what exactly it does to the median that might answer this question, these next series of slides.
Great. Let's go ahead and do that then.
Was there another question to address right now?
Yeah, there's one other one. It said the travel time slide had limits of Tech Road and Georgia Ave. Do you have travel time information for south of Tech Road and how this section is affected by the alternative options?
So we do have the results of the travel time analysis in a later slide for all alternatives and for the full corridor, not just south of Tech Road, but Burtonsville all the way down to the transit center. So hopefully these questions will be answered. If not, we'll be happy to address them again during the chat. So jumping into the median bus lane concept, again, this was the concept developed by the CAC committee members. And actually, if you dig deep into the report, it was initially proposed under state highway study back in the mid 1990s as well, something somewhat similar. So in this stretch from Tech Road to Stewart Lane, basically there would be no change to the existing US 29 roadway for cars in either direction, but the median would be reconstructed to provide one bus lane exclusively for flash vehicles at all times in this segment. And again, the local bus service would need to continue to serve the bus stops, the local bus stops on the right-hand side of the road, whereas some stations here may be relocated into the median to serve this alternative. Next slide. So as we get between Stewart Lane and Timberwood Avenue in the Burnt Mills area, the median is reconstructed to provide only a single bus lane. So this is kind of a reversible lane. The buses would primarily run southbound in the morning and then northbound in the evening in this section. And there would be no changes to the existing number of vehicle travel lanes in this segment. However, there would be some impact to left turn movements in and out of some of the neighborhood streets, such as Prelude and Burnt Mills and some other streets. And more detail than that is in the report where those movements might be diverted should this alternative be selected. Next slide. So then when we get into the Four Corners area proper around University Boulevard and down to the Beltway, there is a change to the existing roadway for regular travel and car lanes, which provide 4 lanes in each direction. Today in this section, they would be reduced to 3 lanes in each section, and the lanes would be slightly narrowed to provide 2 bus lanes, 11-foot bus lanes in the median at all times. And the next slide shows a picture, I believe, of what the station would look like, a little bit of a further widening in this area to provide a station for flash buses in the median in the Four Corners area. And again, keeping the lane reduction for cars in each direction. As we get south and inside the Beltway and down to Sligo Creek, again, no change to the number of car lanes. It goes back to as it is today, 3 lanes in each direction, and we'd reconstruct the median, slightly narrow some of the other lanes to provide a single reversible lane in each direction, peak hour direction for the buses that they would use. Next slide. So in summary, the alternative and the geometry would be that there would be some new traffic signals to get the buses in and out of the median bus lane. Some lane width changes would be required to narrow the lanes for cars and other vehicles. The cross section would also be changed in this Four Corners area. It would be reduced from 8 to 6 lanes to provide 2 bus lanes in that area and the station. It would really require some permits and waivers for changing the width of the lanes and some other impacts to environmental features. The traffic impacts of this alternative are actually pretty severe. It has more failing intersections than the no action condition, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. 17 intersections would fail. And while it helps significantly with the bus travel time in the morning, keeping the Flash BRT service down to about 25 minutes from Burtonsville to downtown Silver Spring, it doesn't really have an advantage in the afternoon for the bus travel time. And that's largely because when you take the regular car lane, one of the regular car lanes away through Four Corners, you go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes in each direction, it creates a lot of congestion for car traffic. That congestion spills back towards downtown Silver Spring as people are trying to exit Silver Spring and head north in the evening rush hour. And the buses get snarled in that traffic coming out of Silver Spring. And by the time they get into the dedicated bus lane in Sligo, they can't make up that lost time. So that was what our simulation results showed. And that was a concern of this alternative. It also had a large right-of-way impact. Even with narrowing the lanes and trying to stay within curb to curb, there was still a lot of needs when you're paving the median for stormwater management, other environmental impacts, structural impacts, couple retaining walls, utility poles that need to be relocated. It's about 10 acres. And then the cost was very expensive, about 100 million to 110 million to reconstruct the roadway for that median bus lane or bus lanes. Next slide.
We got a question on the slide 27. I just wanted to bring up. You mentioned the right-of-way impacts. Is there a slide later on, or do you have a graphic that shows where those impacts might be?
Yes. So we do not have a slide for specific right-of-way impacts in the presentation. However, in the appendix of the report that is posted on the project website, there are conceptual engineering drawings that do have shading or call out where the potential right-of-way impacts would be. And again, I caution that this project is at about what we would call a 5 to 10% level of engineering design. It's very, very conceptual. We didn't run any topographic survey. We didn't pull extensive property records or plats. So this is very, very preliminary and would be refined should the project advance into final engineering design and any right-of-way permits that were needed. Next slide, please. So for the managed lane concept, we're going to start all the way up by Burtonsville and 198. Today in this segment, the buses are allowed to run on the right shoulder if they are so interested in passing some cues of traffic at various signals, jumping through the right turn lane. What we are proposing is that the buses be shifted to the left side or inside shoulder, and that the regular travel lanes be shifted just slightly to the right. So there's the same number of regular travel lanes and the buses would then be allowed to use that full-time with some carpool lane access as well during rush hour. Moving south, next slide, please. In the section between Musgrove and Stewart Lane, again, no changes to the number of existing car lanes would remain the same. But what we are proposing is that during rush hour, so for example, in the morning peak period, when southbound traffic is heading to downtown Silver Spring, that the left lane be converted through signing and pavement marking to a carpool and bus lane only, and that the 3 travel lanes be shifted to the right, and you're allowed to drive on the right shoulder to maintain the same number of car lanes all the way through. At all other times of day, it would remain as it is today, and then in the evening, heading outbound, that left travel lane would be converted to a bus carpool only lane, and then the 3 lanes would remain, shifted slightly to the right, being allowed to drive on the right shoulder. So that's why we manage this lane at different times of day and for different uses. So next slide, next section, please. So as we get into the Burnt Mills area south of 650 to approximately Southwood Drive and in the southbound direction, and then from Burnt Mills Avenue to 650 in the northbound direction, this is where our traffic models told us the best benefit would occur. We would be converting one of the existing travel lanes during rush hour, only in the peak direction, to a bus and carpool lane. And that would be reversed in the evening. The outbound, northbound direction, the left lane would be converted. At all other times of day, it would remain exactly as it is, with 3 lanes in each direction. Next slide. So from from Southwood or Burnt Mills, there would be no changes to the cross section. The flash buses would run in regular traffic. As based on our analysis, these aren't congestion points with some other intersection improvements we'll talk about later. And then it would run down to the existing section between Sligo Creek Parkway and Spring Street, where the reversible lane exists today. And what we would propose is that reversible lane be rededicated to buses and carpools only. So southbound in the morning and northbound in the evening. No other changes to the cross section in that segment or any other times a day. Next slide. So in summary, in the managed lane concept, although it doesn't provide end-to-end consistent dedicated bus lanes, it hits the hot spots. There's no new signals or turn restrictions required, no changes in lane widths required. All the lanes stay as wide as they are today. There is a change to the cross section in terms of the section between Musgrove and Stewart, where we're allowing general traffic to ride on the shoulder to maintain the same number of lanes. And then again, between 650 and Southwood, southbound, and Burnt Mills northbound, where we would be proposing a single lane conversion to bus and carpool. This still would require some permits and waivers even to do the stuff on the shoulder. The shoulder may need to be reconstructed. In terms of traffic impact, it significantly improves the performance for all intersections. Only 5 remain congested. The travel times are also significantly improved from almost doubling from existing conditions if you took no action. The car travel time holds about steady from Burtonsville all the way down to the transit center, about 35 minutes, but the BRT and carpool travel time really zips along at about 23 minutes. And in the northbound, the car holds very nicely at 18, the BRT, about at 25, the BRT and carpool. Right-of-way impact with the retrofits that we're mainly doing is only 2.2 acres, which might be a little bit larger if there are any flash stations relocated down the road if this is built. And the cost is significantly less. It's about half the cost of the median bus lane concept at 40 million, between 40 million and 50 million. So I want to stop here. I see some more questions popping up in the chat box.
Yeah, we got a couple here. I'll just kind of go through them in the order they came in. So the first question is, do these designs take into account the draft Complete Streets design guidance from Montgomery County Planning?
So, we are looking at the need to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles when the cross section is changed, when it's retrofit. That will be further addressed during the engineering design once we identify specifically which segments of US 29 are going to get any actual road work to implement this. Our focus during this study was really around the station areas, about a 10-minute walk or 10-minute bike ride within the station areas, and that is more so where we wanted to make the recommendations and remove gaps and barriers from crossing 29 or getting between the neighborhoods and the flash stations. So we didn't really look as comprehensively linearly along the entire 11 miles of 29. We know that there are recommendations in the bicycle master plan for side paths and trails like that, but it remains to be seen if those linear projects will fit with advancing in a reconstructed cross section in the segments that are impacted.
Great. We also had a request for clarification about the managed lane alternative, that it does or does not include a bus lane from Burnt Mills to Sligo Creek. If you could clarify that.
There is no dedicated bus lane from Burnt Mills to Sligo Creek. The buses can run in mixed traffic, meaning they can be in the left lane if they want to. They don't have any stations, and then be in the right lane if they have to come at a station like in the Four Corners area.
Great. Let's do. We got a couple questions asking about enforcement of the kind of mixed traffic lanes. How would you kind of prevent single occupancy vehicles from coming over and using those?
Great question. So, at this stage of the project, we recognize that enforcement would be needed for some of these alternatives. We believe, based on, speaking with some other local jurisdictions in the state that have dedicated bus lanes, for example, in Baltimore City and MTA, that, they have had some success doing manual enforcement. They have enacted legislation, for penalties. They have also mounted cameras on buses. So we believe that the technology exists to enforce it. And it is something that we would definitely look at in the full engineering design phase. We obviously understand that, if people violate it, it won't work as well. So we take the enforcement issue very seriously, but we do believe it's solvable.
And one more question was about in the mock-ups, the managed lanes look like they're red. Is that something you'd anticipate doing for the project, or is that just kind of to show that?
Well, it's right now. It's for that's a great question, and right now it's really for graphical visualization to help the audience understand the type of traffic controls for these managed lanes. Whether they be fully red painted asphalt, red tinted asphalt, or if they are just like hatched near intersections, if they have electronic signs overhead, if they have just static signs next to them. There's a lot of emerging guidance on this, and we would be working closely with Maryland DOT State Highway, since it is their roadway, on what they feel most comfortable would give the best positive guidance to motorists about what times of day and what vehicles are allowed in there. If in the report there is some examples of those types of signs, signals, and marking to do that, but the short answer is it is definitely possible that the lanes could be painted red for some or all of the segments.
All right, I'm just going to give one more question here, and then probably good to move on. But there's a question asking if the proposals take into account traffic patterns resulting from potential beltway expansion plans, or
So Yeah, so right now, the design that we have both for the median bus lane alternative, managed lane bus lane alternative, and some other intersection improvements that you'll see in the forthcoming slides are compatible with any future toll lanes on the Beltway. I mean, at this point, we don't really know, how that interchange and ramps would be exactly reconfigured. So there's a lot more coordination that would be need to be done during the design. That's really all I can say at this point. The information is still being shared about the toll lane study.
Great. We've got a few more, but we could probably just circle back to those as we keep moving here.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. So a couple other things that we wanted to include in this mobility package as we're defining our recommendations is a suite of transportation system management and demand management. So the goals of these kind of strategies are to better manage the network that we already have, the pavement, the signals that we already have, and also provide the best information to motorists and commuters so that they may be able to seek the best mode of travel, time of travel, route to take. And at $1 to $5 million, we estimated these measures combined would include providing additional real-time electronic messaging signs to commuters as they come into Montgomery County from Howard County, so they could understand how long it would take to get to downtown Silver Spring, and if they should park and ride or park and carpool, park and ride on Flash or carpool. Incentive programs that the county could develop with large employers or just through other operators to encourage carpool, rideshare matching, transit use, bicycle share systems, what we call integrated corridor management plans, so that from a traffic control center, both at the county and the state headquarters, that when incidents happen on one of the major north-south freeways, that the spillover effects were minimized on the others, and increasing incident response patrols. So typically, state highway doesn't put incident response patrols on arterial roadways, the signalized roadways. They're really reserved for freeways, but we really think US 29 should be an exception and have those, so that crashes can be removed quicker and traffic can return to normal flow. Smart signal technology, the state is investing in a number of corridors where the signal timings are a little bit more dynamic than preset for just several hours in the morning or evening peak, so that they can respond to real-time traffic demand and traffic patterns. And then lastly, a really unique program to provide real-time parking space availability in the Flash commuter lots. So the driver would know before they turn into Burtonsville that their space is left, or which lot to proceed to find spaces, so that you wouldn't miss the connection and wouldn't spend any time wasting time driving around the lot looking for parking. So all of these are relatively low-hanging fruit that we feel would add to mobility in the corridor. Next slide. So we're going to talk then about some priority intersection improvements that we feel are important for the overall mobility package. There were 6 intersections that we identified that had a failing level of service that we really wanted to improve strategically throughout the corridor, and those are from north to south Greencastle, Tech Road, Stewart Lane, the 650 interchange, the I-495 interchange, and Sligo Creek. And I'll go through each one of those briefly. Next slide, please. At Greencastle, we're proposing to add an additional right lane for the eastbound approach, add a second left turn lane for the southbound approach, and widen eastbound Greencastle so that 2 eastbound lanes can turn onto it. That would be about $4 to $5 million in construction costs. Next intersection. At Tech Road, we're proposing to add an additional second southbound left turn lane and widen Tech Road to provide a additional westbound right turn lane onto northbound US 29. And these improvements would be between 2 to 3 million. Next slide. At Stewart Lane, we're proposing to add a second southbound left turn lane from 29 onto Stewart Lane, and that would be about $2 to $3 million in construction. Next slide. At the interchange with 650, we're proposing to widen southbound 29 to provide a continuous third through lane through the interchange. And that may also include some reconfiguring of the on and off ramps from 650 to 29. This one's a little bit more expensive at 6 to 7 million, but it's important for allowing the bus priority alternatives and maintaining good vehicle travel times. Next slide. At I-495, coming south on 29, for the exit to go onto the Beltway west towards Bethesda, we're recommending that that ramp be widened to allow a right turn from the second to right outside lane on southbound 29. It would narrow down to a single lane, and then the acceleration lane, once you got on the Beltway, would be significantly extended to reduce friction. This would help with reducing the amount of lane jockeying that's going on as drivers commute south through Four Corners, and even out the lane utilization and reduce queuing. And that would be about $2 to $3 million. And like I mentioned earlier, SHA has advised us that this is okay to do as an interim measure prior to any final decision or design on the toll lanes. Next slide. And lastly, at Sligo Creek, we are proposing widening of Sligo Creek Parkway just through the intersection to provide a second westbound through lane on both the approach and the receiving side to increase capacity for Sligo Creek Parkway, and that is estimated at between $3 to $4 million. Next slide. And lastly, but certainly not least, for pedestrian and bicycle improvements, we took a long look at each flash station area. We looked at the surrounding land uses. We looked at the key connections where people wanted to come from and go. And we really focused on about a half a mile walk, 10-minute walk, or a 2-mile bike ride, and really looked at the existing infrastructure, what was planned or programmed through the bike master plan or other projects, and where the gaps and barriers were. And we really wanted to make this, as comfortable a walking and biking environment as we could, and making it seamless so that people could get to these stations. Next slide. And the types of improvements that we came up with, this is an example station area map in the Burnt Mills area, where we really identified specific infrastructure improvements for new and widened sidewalks, ADA upgrades, bike lanes, marked lanes, buffered lanes, signed routes, upgrades for crossing US 29, and bike parking or bike shares. We actually identified over 200 individual walking and biking recommendations across these 8 stations. There are detailed maps on the website in the appendix of the report, and an itemized list for each individual improvement. And in that itemized list, it discusses if that improvement is carried forward from, say, a sector plan or the bicycle master plan, or if it's a brand new recommendation for the study. So we're very interested, if we missed anything in these type of recommendations, because, we want input from residents that live in the corridor, work in the corridor, that may be walking or biking, and want to get to the flash stations. Next slide. And that was about, altogether, that was about $15 to $20 million to construct those 200 individual sidewalk bike lane recommendations. So again, just to bring us back to the summary of the results, The median busway results are mixed at best. There's definitely some transit benefit in the southbound in the morning, but there's a lot of impact for autos, particularly in the afternoon. And the buses don't really get much benefit in the afternoon, which is a big concern with the price tag as high as it is. The managed lane concept really provides substantial improvement over no action conditions. It really benefits both transit, allows for carpools. You know, again, the median busway didn't allow any carpools. It didn't encourage that mode shift. So the managed lane provides that, and it also benefits autos. It really checks all the boxes in terms of cost, right away, traffic performance, and travel time. Next slide, we have a few more charts, I believe, summarizing this. So yeah, if you're looking from left to right, so again, this is the full corridor from Burtonsville to the Silver Spring Transit Center. You're about 30 minutes today, 35 on the express bus. These are modeled results. If you took no action, you know, you're going up to 45 minutes for cars to do, if you don't make any improvements. Buses get degraded as well, even after all the investment in the flash vehicles and flash stations and transit signal priority. When we do the managed lane, the car travel times really hold relative to existing conditions, but the buses get even faster and the carpools get even faster. And these are the modes we want to prioritize. They carry the most people. The median lane, again, it doesn't really do anything to improve over the no build for cars, but it does help the buses in the morning. If we look in the evening on the next slide, please. Again, the existing conditions, the no build, a little bit worse coming out of downtown Silver Spring, but the managed lane clearly improves all modes coming out of Silver Spring and heading out to Burtonsville, while the median lane really struggles with that congestion building out of downtown to Silver Spring into the reduced cross section in Four Corners. So it didn't really show the operational performance benefit that we would have liked to see. Next slide, please. So just a summary of results. There's lots more graphics and information in the report if you're interested. Again, you know, the managed lane just really checks all the boxes. It has the least number of failing intersections, the least number of failing segments. It moves the most people. If you go way back to the beginning and remember that slide about how traffic moves in the corridor, walking, biking, carpooling, et cetera. You know, we're getting almost 4,600 people per hour through the corridor, which is really good for an arterial. It cuts that travel time down. It holds the line for cars while improving buses and carpools, and minimizes the right-of-way cost, right-of-way impact. Of course, there is still a construction cost to do this, but operationally the benefit, you know, is on the order of magnitude that is positive for this. Next slide. So our actual recommendations for this mobility package at this point, again, there'll be lots of future touch points for public input. The council needs to review this and consider it carefully. We are proposing to advance the managed lane concept at $40 to $50 million. And that specifically means from Musgrove to Stewart Lane, running that peak period left lane, carpool and bus lane, right lane, shoulder use. Between Southwood and Burnt Mills and 650, that peak period bus and managed lane conversion. And then just in the Dale Drive or Sligo to Spring Street area, the reversible lane conversion to a bus and carpool lane. Right now, we're not recommending any improvements north of Musgrove Lane, such as the left side shoulder. We don't feel that has merit at this time to carry forward. We are recommending to advance the intersection and interchange improvements as a package of 20 to 25 million, and advancing the station access improvements as a package of 15 to 20 million. Next slide. So these could be broken out into 3 projects. Right now, we're not recommending, which order they're implemented. It's really a capital programming decision that the council and DOT will carefully consider in partnering with SHA. But project 1 would be the pedestrian and bicycle projects. This really can be done independently, doesn't need to integrate with anything on the bus priority carpool stuff. Package 2 could be the intersection improvements. We would certainly recommend that it has value to be done before the bus priority, but doesn't have to be at those 6 intersections. And then lastly, the bus priority, the managed lane and the part-time shoulder use construction and conversion. Next slide. So I think I kick it over to Corey here, and I don't know if we want to ask the moderator for questions.
Yeah, let's pause for a moment and see if there are any questions that have built up, Kyle.
Yeah, so we had 2 people asking about the widening of 29 near New Hampshire, what impacts that would have on the bridge, kind of running over that.
Great question. I believe that there may need to be some widening of the bridge structure. I don't know if Matt wants to confirm that from the engineering design side. If he's able to be unmuted. We can get you that answer shortly. Next question.
Yeah, the next question says, seems confusing that bus-only trip time northbound could exceed managed lane northbound. Could you explain in a little more detail?
Bus-only trip time could exceed, I'm sorry, let me try to read it in the chat screen. I'm sorry, I don't see it in the chat screen.
Probably sent directly to Kyle. I think what they're getting at is it doesn't seem intuitive that the managed lane would run faster than the northbound median bus lane alternative, that the BRT should be able to run faster than carpool and BRT, I think is what I interpret the question.
So the managed lane alternative actually removes cars from the general travel lanes because you're allowing and encouraging carpool use. And the median BRT lane did not begin until Sligo Creek, whereas the managed lane alternative begins right at Spring Street, where the reversible lane kicks in and moves the buses past that congested corridor, gets them north of Sligo Creek through 495, where there's not a ton of congestion today. And then as soon as they hit Burnt Mills, where the congestion, is a source of congestion, they're back in a dedicated lane. So it really was about addressing exactly where the hot spots were for both regular traffic, congestion and bus, slow speeds for buses. So it is a little bit counterintuitive, but we've run the simulations and we've shared them with the project team, and we see about releasing a clip of them. But the location of the entrance to the median bus lane really, and it's also taking that lane away, that 4th lane away through 4 corners. That 4th lane stacks a lot of cars during rush hour. Then if you take that lane away, all those cars that need to be stacked to get through 4 corners heading north in the evening, that queue runs right back smack into downtown Silver Spring. So it really creates a compounding, queue and shockwave, and they can't recover from that. They do fly once they get into the managed lane, but they're really penalized coming out of downtown Silver Spring. And I would say some of the feedback we're looking for in the survey questionnaire that Corey will mention momentarily is like is there a mix and match? Is there some segment that you really like, why don't you do the reversible lane with the median? I really like the median in Four Corners, and we can look at that as it moves into final design. But this is our recommendation at this moment.
We had two other questions come in asking about the median alternative and the impacts on the stations that are being built right now. Would those stations need to be moved to the median, or kind of what's the impact there?
That is another great question, and I really appreciate everybody paying close attention. The stations can be moved. Certainly if the buses are in the left lane, be it in the median or a managed lane on the left, the stations can be moved, but they do not have to be moved. Depending on the limits of each segment of a managed lane or a median lane, there's things that we can do with queue jumps or bus only phases at a traffic light to jump them out of the lane over to the right lane, out of the left lane or median over to the right lane, pick up the passengers and jump back in. Admittedly, they'll lose a little bit of time, but overall there'll still be a large net gain. So these are important design details that need to be considered as the project advances into final engineering.
I do think, Paul, that the concept that was developed for the median alternative assumed that the stations would be relocated. Now, obviously, that's a design change that could be made, but I think the initial concept assumed that the stations would be in the median with the median bus lane.
That is correct. If we are taking Mr. Emerson and Mr. Smoot's concept whole cloth, the median, the station in Four Corners is in the median.
Any other questions, Kyle?
That looks to be it for now.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, we'll wrap this up. Just a couple more slides to get through, and then we can get to the rest of the Q&A. So, what are the next steps? So, following this presentation, the public feedback period will open up. There's a survey. There's a link to the survey up on the website currently, and we'll share the link of the survey on the very next slide. And we really do want to hear back. What do you think about the concepts? Are there different concepts that we should have considered that we didn't consider? If you had to prioritize the alternatives or what should be done, how would you prioritize those? These things really don't work without your feedback. Once we conclude the public feedback period, we would look to finalize the study report. We would then present the results of the analysis and the work done to date and the feedback that we've heard to both the planning board and the county council. At that time, the county council could opt to select a preferred alternative or alternatives, since we've talked about kind of a number of packages that could be moved forward independently. That would have to be seen what happens at that juncture. And then funding dependent, the advancement of design could occur for the selected alternative or alternatives. In terms of feedback, there's a number of ways that you can participate. Obviously, there's much more information on the project webpage that's shown here. And these slides will be uploaded to that page. So if you want the direct link, you can click on it from there. We can also email it out to the list of attendees as well. But up on that website now, there's a draft version of the report. It's draft because obviously, without the feedback, the report's not considered final, but it has everything else, all the analysis that's been done, all the existing conditions information, the appendix there for the bike improvements, the traffic analysis that was performed, all of that's up on the website. There's a link to the survey. That link is shown here. It's a very brief survey, only 4 or 5 questions. And then there are obviously some open-ended portions that you can provide greater detail. Obviously, you can email comments directly to me, and those will come right into my inbox, and then we'll catalog those comments with all the other comments that come in through the survey. and review those. If you're more accustomed to writing your thoughts down, by all means, you can send your comments to the address there. I will just note, as I noted earlier, most of us are not working in the office at this moment. We do periodically pop in and out just to check on things. So if you really want your comment to get in and get, if you're looking for a response, I would suggest emailing. If you just want to provide the comment, you can definitely mail it, and they'll be compiled with all the other comments. So before we get into the Q&A session, I just want to go back over kind of the functions for how that's going to work. If you do want to speak as opposed to write a question to Kyle, we ask that you raise your hand. That way we can identify you in the Zoom chat or in the Zoom participant list and unmute you. In order to raise your hand, click on the participants button at the bottom of the screen. A new window will pop up, and then click the blue raise hand button. If you've dialed in by phone and haven't joined through your computer, in order to raise your hand by phone, you would hit *9. If you want to just ask a question through the chat, again, click on the chat button at the bottom of the menu. A chat box will pop up. The default for the chat box is typically to send the chat to everyone, so everyone will see the question. In order to kind of help us monitor the questions, we ask that you send those to Kyle. In the drop-down menu there, you can select Kyle's name and type your question, and then Kyle will relay them to us. So with that, we're going to open up the Q&A session for the remainder of the meeting. Again, if you don't have any questions, I want to thank you for joining in and listening to the presentation. We hope you found it informative. We hope that you do intend to provide some feedback, because we really do want to hear your feedback and thoughts on what we've presented tonight. And we look forward to the next steps. So with that, we'll open up the Q&A. I see we've got a guest listed as iPad 2, so I'm going to ask to unmute you, so you can unmute yourself now and ask your question.
What is the thinking behind the managed lane in the left lane versus a HOV lane in the right lane? There's limited right turn requirements along the corridor, and it just seems there'd be less bus jockeying from the center to the right, as much for the Metro bus and ride-on, less so for the Flash.
That's a great question. Corey, you want to start, or you want me to?
Sure. So, the thought was, while there is, US 29 isn't like a heavily commercial corridor with lots of driveway entrances. Depending on which segment of it you are in, there are a number of neighborhood driveway entrances. In addition, so the Metro buses and the local ride-on buses would still use the right lane. Those buses stop much more frequently. The BRT stations are much more infrequent. So those buses would stay in the right lane, so there wouldn't be as much shifting of lanes. If the BRT stations, and there are only 2 stations, the Burnt Mill station and the Four Corners station, were to be relocated to the median, then the BRT would not even have to shift over. Is there anything else, Paul, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, traditionally the right lane moves a lot slower than the left lane. And, the Flash service is, what we would describe in transit jargon as limited stop. And, the county will continue to run ride-on buses up and down the corridor. I mean, the service patterns may change slightly to better align with the Flash stations, but, we didn't want to create a situation, whether it be for Flash bus drivers or for carpoolers, where they start to play leapfrog and try to, dash around, the stopped ride-on bus or a right turner into a commercial driveway. We didn't feel that was safe. We felt it was easier to manage and going to be faster on the left-hand side.
Let's see. Kyle, do you have any questions building up?
Yeah, we got one question on when the deadline for comments is.
Sure. So I guess there's no strict deadline. I will, or I am setting kind of an artificial deadline for the end of August, which gives everyone about 45 days or so to comment. The plan is that sometime this fall we'd be looking to go present to both the planning board and the county council. We would like to have most of the comments by that point so that we can be sure to share kind of a complete picture with those two bodies. So since we are looking to do that in the fall, I am asking that if we could get them in by the end of August, that would be great. Obviously, really, the comment period never really ends or terminates on any project. My email is always open. You can send comments or questions through that relating to the project even after the end of August if something strikes you as you're continuing to look at things.
We have another question asking on slide 25 with the median bus lane. It says it appears passenger access is only accommodated for southbound buses. How is boarding accommodated for both directions? I think you may have kind of touched on this a little bit, but.
Slide 25.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, that was just a snapshot of where the southbound station is. There is another point just within a few hundred feet where the buses will shift to the left and the station will open up on the right. So this was just, just a point.
Illustrative.
Yeah. I think the plan view in the report, the engineering drawing in the appendix will show the location of both platforms.
Let's see. I see another question from user iPad 2, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment on the median lane. You aren't using that as the top recommendation, but one of the downsides to it is it really will restrict ingress and egress to a neighborhood with almost 1,400 homes. There would only be the Southwood entrance from Route 29 into the neighborhood, and access via University Boulevard is not that convenient if you're traveling north on 29. So that should be, I mean, it looks like that's not the recommended approach, but that is a major downside from the Northwood Four Corners neighborhood perspective.
Noted. Thank you. And we said earlier in the presentation that it was our goal to minimize any impacts to the adjacent neighborhoods, and especially since car travel times aren't really improving under that alternative, and we're restricting access. We're very mindful of that.
All right, we've got another question that I think is similar to one that was asked earlier, but was just sent again. So the question is, why did the median bus lane scenario result in the same AM person throughput as the no build? Was there no consideration of shifting modes from single occupancy vehicles to transit, including by better transit travel times?
That's a great question. And so, our assumption under the no action was that flash service, would continue to run as it's about to roll out later this year in the fall. We didn't change the ridership or mode choice, we call it. We didn't change that in the model for transit. So we wanted to be conservative. We obviously had to adjust for carpools, because in the model we were putting cars in the carpool lane. But for the ridership, we wanted to be conservative and assumed that the flash projections as they were reported to Federal Highway for Federal Transit for the grant, that they weren't changed. It is certainly a fair question based on the final alternative to go back and rerun those numbers and to see if there's propensity for increased ridership with faster travel times. We would certainly hope so and expect so, but again, we had specific reasons for holding that static in this study.
You have any other questions, Kyle? I opened up the general chat. It looks like there's some questions in there. See, the first one I see that I don't think we've touched on up to this point is, what about impact to pedestrian bike access and safety for these concepts resulting from changes in traffic speed? So I think generally the viewpoint is that, while yes, the travel times are decreasing, they're decreasing because we're having improvements to congestion. People may move through the corridor faster, but we're also combining that with improvements for ped and bike access and safety. Those were some of those 200 improvements that were identified that would seek to improve access to not just the stations, but safety along the corridor as well, crossings of 29 and other improvements. Anything to add, Paul?
No, I mean, I would just say that, I mean, the county takes, pedestrian and bike safety very seriously. Vision Zero, I mean, especially around the station areas where there's going to be more walking and biking. And, like Corey said, just because one alternative is improving travel time. I mean, during rush hour, it's not like we're expecting, 55-mile-an-hour freeway speeds up and down the corridor. I mean, we may be improving from 7 or 8 miles an hour through Four Corners to 15 or 20. So, I mean, it's these are the hours with the most pedestrian and bicycle activity. So we're very mindful of that. And if you have other specific areas of concern for pedestrian and bicycle safety, or suggestions, please give us your comments.
Yeah, there are a couple of these as I'm scanning the questions. I see a question about safety and crossings around the Tech Road and Old Columbia Pike junctions. So we'll capture these comments, and then as part of the next round of work, when we dig into the actual improvements in more detail, we can be sure to focus on those specific areas or concerns. Says the current conditions are not fast for bikers. Has there been a consideration for bikers? Could there be something similar to the Capitol Crescent Trail that connects Burtonsville, Fairland area to downtown Silver Spring, Wheaton? The trail could go through the neighborhoods, Colesville, Wheaton, Regional Park, Slugger Creek Trail. Definitely, a great comment. This study did not specifically look at kind of a single north-south trail connection, but I think that's definitely something that the bicycle map looks to do through a variety of projects, and should definitely be looked at, in other stages or other phases. Question, will there be any bike parking near the stations, or is the expectation that cyclists will bring their bikes on the BRT? So each of the flash stations that are under construction now will have bike racks as part of that station design. So if the user is comfortable, they can definitely lock up their bike at the station and leave it there. But the flash buses are designed to actually have the user carry their bike on board, and there are bike racks in the rear of the bus. So no more having to hop off the curb and lower the rack and put your bike on the front of the bus. You can actually bring it on board. So you have either option available to. I see a comment about adding a signalized crosswalk at US 29 and Stewart Lane. some more comments about safety in the areas of Tech Road, Stewart, Fairland, Four Corners, and Sligo Creek. Definitely, I think we all agree the sentiment creating safer crosswalks is needed. And this, this I will say, this effort doesn't ignore or doesn't replace the other countywide efforts that are underway. The Vision Zero efforts, the bike waste program, the pedestrian safety programs that our traffic division does. There are many efforts, that are underway. This project would be just one facet of that.
Another question we got kind of in relation to crossings. There's a question about if adding a additional westbound lane to Sligo, what impact will that have on crossing times of 29? It seems like the comments kind of getting at adding that westbound lane could reduce the allowed through time on 29, which could add backing up.
Well, actually, it's intended to increase the amount of through time on 29 and reduce the amount of green time for Sligo. But, obviously we don't want to go below any minimum amount of walk time and flashing don't walk that a pedestrian would need to cross. And there's, lots of ways to program the signal cycle to make sure that, whenever a pedestrian pushes the button that they get a full time required to cross. So, we did set those parameters in our model, and we do feel that, that is a beneficial improvement for that intersection. But we will take this comment into note and go back and make sure that, the pedestrians aren't negatively impacted in any way.
Great. Another question is, at what point do you coordinate with SHA? And then they mention that there are proposals for building a fence down the median on 29 south of New Hampshire.
So we have been coordinating with SHA through the course of this project. We engaged with them kind of at the outset of the study to talk about what we were proposing to do, and they provided some feedback as in terms of things to look at. And then at the conclusion of the study, when we had the results, those results were shared with SHA, both District 3 and some of the staff from the central office. And we provided feedback. So we continuously coordinate with SHA. The department has regular meetings with them. So, as this project would advance, what we hear in those other meetings, we would incorporate into this work. And likewise, given the fact that this is a state road and not a county road, that coordination would be, at an even greater level than it might be on other projects. I'm going to jump back into a couple of these. So there's a question, do the bicycle ped improvements around the stations like Tech Road include safe passage for nearby streets that currently have no sidewalks, like Columbia Road just below Tech Road? So I don't have all 200 memorized, but the station catchment area was not just immediately around the station, as I think Paul mentioned in the presentation. It was about a half a mile walk shed around the station, and then I think 2 miles, was it, Paul, for the bicycle improvement. So it should capture definitely nearby streets. It's not going to capture every single street, depending on how far away you live from the station, but it should definitely capture the nearby streets. And if we found gaps in terms of sidewalks or other improvements, those would likely be identified to be addressed. So, I would urge everyone to, if you're interested in the bike and pedestrian improvements, definitely go to the project website and check out, I want to say it's Appendix 3, that has the bike ped improvements.
We got another question here. That some places in the U.S. have created BRT systems that eventually become just another route. Are there any plans to protect this investment and make sure BRT remains a premium train style experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what this study was about, was, a recognition that the initial investment in Flash that's being constructed now, got us closer to that vision, much closer than anything else that's currently out there or will be out there in the next couple of months. But this study was an effort to look at other alternatives and other options for further improving upon that. And I would argue that just because we've identified a number of alternatives with this study, there's likely still other things that can be done. There are going to be new technologies that are emerging, whether it be signal technologies or bus technologies or operating strategies. The state of the practice is constantly evolving. And I think we would continue to evolve with it and take lessons learned that we see from other jurisdictions that are getting BRTs up and running, as well as lessons we learn as we start the Flash on 29 and hopefully look at getting Flash on other corridors in the county.
Great. Question just came in a few minutes ago from Jay asking, basically with it already being somewhat difficult for pedestrians on the Colesville sidewalks to cross the existing beltway ramps with a proposed 2-lane beltway entrance ramp for southbound Colesville, how do you propose pedestrians cross that intersection safely?
That's a great question, and that was something we had talked about internally, how to make sure the right traffic controls are there for that crossing, especially during bell time around the school. There's a lot of ways to do it where that second choice lane may only operate say in the morning and not in the afternoon, or with enhanced flashing warning lights or even a raised crosswalk. So there's a lot of ways it can be engineered to make sure that it doesn't endanger pedestrian safety, because we definitely don't want it to be a barrier for people trying to get to the station or to the school.
Great. Another question on does the ongoing Purple Line construction affect any of the proposed modifications?
Not that I'm aware of. Nothing that comes to mind.
Okay. Not a question, but a comment just came through. It says widening Sligo Creek Parkway would possibly negate MNC PPC's completed project just east of 29 to reduce runoff from the impervious surface of the roadway. So just wanted to mention that.
We will get a copy of those drawings and make sure that they're coordinated if that intersection improvement moves forward.
I think you've touched on this a little bit, but another question asks, are all of the bike ped improvements for around Burnt Mills? I believe there was some discussion of them kind of throughout the corridor, but if you could speak to that, that would be great.
Sure. No, they're at the 8 flash stations, which are in Fenton Street. Let me make sure I call them all out here. Hold on, I'm pulling up the report. They are at Fenton Street, Four Corners, Burnt Mills, Oak Leaf, White Oak, April Lane, and Tech Road. Those are the areas that we focused on for the bike pad improvements.
Great. Another question asks if any of the intersections will become protected intersections after improvements. I'm assuming this is kind of related to bicycle style protected intersections.
So that's another great question. We did not have any protected intersections in our concepts right now. But if there's a particular location that you feel should be a priority for protection for bicyclists, please put that comment in.
Okay. Another question asking if there's been any data collected on auto traffic on the corridor since we entered COVID. I know it was mentioned earlier that most of the data was collected pre COVID.
So not particularly for this study, but the state highway has continuous traffic monitoring stations around the metro area. And through some other projects, we've been monitoring them. Traffic levels are to about 70 to 85% of pre-COVID levels. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all during rush hour, but over the course of a day, they're about 70 to 85%, and that doesn't mean that buses are full, or nearly full. So we're monitoring that, and certainly, if how it ties to schools being back in session or whatnot. I think I do want to just add on and make a general statement about how we do this kind of transportation planning during COVID, and this is in line with what State Highway is doing, and really, our objective in this study is to really meet transportation and mobility needs over the next several decades. So it's not, while there may be some permanent changes in travel behavior and travel patterns because of COVID, we really don't know yet. And there's not any model out there that can accurately predict it. So really, we're making the long-term plans as we were before, and the county and the state will continue to monitor, if travel pattern changes seem to be more permanent and how that might affect, the mobility package for this particular study.
Let's see. I see a comment about putting the link here. We will, if Kyle starts to get a buildup of questions, I will drop the link to the survey and the website in the chat box. Oh, it looks like Kyle already beat me to it. Thank you, Kyle.
No
Sorry,
problem.
just needed to scan down. Do you want to build the stations now? Should the construction have been delayed until after traffic flow disruptions? So no, I mean, at the time, none of what's been discussed tonight was being considered as part of the initial Flash project. It just happens that the timing overlaps a little bit. We do see a value in the investment that's being made now. I think as I previously stated in response to another comment, it was an initial investment, and the work that's being studied as part of this would be an addition to that initial investment. Looks like question, what data do we have that suggests that carpooling will increase with the HOV alternative? Obviously this is tied. So I'll let you answer that piece, Paul, and then there's kind of a secondary piece to that says ties it to COVID.
Right. So yeah, great question, and again, great point about COVID and how our commuting patterns may change. With commuting patterns changing, we really, again, we're looking long-term here over the next 2 decades. So we can't assume that, it will be unsanitary or unhealthy, for carpooling or transit. Closely monitor that. But so HOV propensity, I mean, first of all, when we did our surveys of vehicle occupancy in the project during documenting existing conditions, we found 12 to 15% of cars already had multiple occupants during rush hour, but there was no existing carpool lane for them to utilize. And that's several percentage points higher than the Washington region as a whole. If you survey, freeways or arterials that don't have existing carpool facilities. So what we believe is, with that propensity already out there on the corridor with people carpooling, and with the expected travel time benefits for using the carpool lanes, we really do feel that, we'll get that additional bump in mode. And again, we're not looking to convert, 50% or something like that. What, all we need to, make the results a reality is a 5 to 10% increase in carpooling. So we're not talking, some kind of, mass commuting overhaul or something like that. It's just building on the propensity, some incentivization, and offering the travel time advantages, which has been proven in other carpool lanes around the region, that it does get a bump when you provide that travel time. And this is not, there has been, I just want to reiterate, there's absolutely no discussion and no proposal of charging any fee for carpoolers to use that lane. That is not anywhere in the study.
Any other questions coming through your chat, Kyle?
Yeah, I just got one. I'll just go ahead and read it. The question is, what is the status of local bus service for the new BRT? Previously, we were told no ride-on south of Four Corners and that the Flex bus would be used for the adjacent neighborhoods that would have to travel north to get to the BRT to go south. Now Flex is not running because of COVID. Can you update us on the changes to the local bus service to get to BRT?
Trying to see. I don't know what the specific plans are, and I'm trying to see if anyone. Okay, so I just got a text from someone that's listening in on the DOT staff. All the changes that were proposed for the local services are on hold at this point. So I think the plan is, given the current pandemic, obviously there was a sizable reduction in the service levels for transit, both WMATA and Ride-On made. The plan is to try and get those back to something that resembles normal operations and get the Flash running before any other changes to the system or services would be made. So unfortunately, COVID has forced us to alter our plans somewhat. Anything else coming in your chat? I'm not seeing any raised hands.
I think there was a question from a little bit earlier on asking, let me find it real quick. I think it's asking specifically about plans for right at Spring Street. And I think that the comment about the protected intersections was directed at that as well. So just generally, if you could speak to what kind of the plans are for at Spring Street itself.
I think at Spring Street, we weren't proposing anything specifically other than repurposing the reversible lane. We'd have to dig a little bit deeper into the Fenton Street station area ped and bike recommendations to see if there was anything that touched the Spring Street intersection. But if this is an important concern for people that use this intersection, walk and bike through it, please give us a specific comment about looking at that.
Yeah, I think the main comment there was, since we have separated bike lanes along Spring Street, just if there's an opportunity there to potentially make that a protected intersection like we have at Spring and Second. So I think that's the main question there. So just something to note.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comment.
Yep. Another question just came through. It appears that both the New Hampshire Bridge and the Paint Branch Bridge will not be widened. Is this the case? Is the Northwest Branch or NWB Bridge sufficient to take the added stretch? So yeah, probably Northwest Branch Trail Bridge there.
So again, we might have to.
Corey, this is Matt.
Oh,
can you
there
hear
we
me
go.
now?
Yes,
Hey.
we can.
Great. figured out how to unmute myself. Yeah, so I guess back to that original New Hampshire bridge question. No, the New Hampshire bridge does not need to be widened. It's really a repurposing of the lanes across the structure. The widening really occurs on the south side of the bridge itself. With respect to the other bridge over Northwest Branch or Paint Branch, those are really just some resurfacing, redecking to be able to accommodate the bus lanes. So the structures do not need to be widened.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I got texted a question that maybe we missed in the chat. Question about security cameras at the stations. So the stations will have security cameras. They'll be mounted up in the canopies. We're not likely, just given kind of the layout of the station, to get 100% full coverage of every aspect of the station. I think the question in particular relates to views of the bike racks. Once we get the cameras installed, we can look at the views that we're getting for each location and modify them. The primary focus of the security cameras is to have views of the ticket vending machines, because those will store cash, and we'll have staff that will periodically come onto the platform to empty the cash from those machines. But we will take a look at the cameras and see that we can get as much coverage as we can with the cameras that we have available.
I don't think we asked this one yet, but there's a question. What data do we have that suggests that carpooling will increase with the HOV alternative?
Yes, I think we did respond to that.
Oh.
Yeah, about the surveys and the travel time savings and the incentive programs.
Okay. I think that's it. I had a lot of questions coming my way, so apologies if I've missed anybody's. Please feel free to resend them again or raise your hand to ask it.
Yeah, we've got, so we're at 8:14, got about 16 minutes left. Not seeing anyone with a raised hand. So, obviously if you have any last minute questions or anything burning, please feel free to shoot those to Kyle or raise your hand or however you want to send them our way through the full chat. You're welcome to that. If not, we thank you for attending. Oh, I see. It looks like. See a hand go up. Oh, Drew, hold on, Drew. Let me get you unmuted. There you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. You guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think Paul and Kyle and I will stick around for a little bit longer in case anyone wants to ask any lingering questions. But like I said, contact information should still be up on the screen. Here, let me go back one slide, or two slides. There's the information for the project website and the survey. Please do, provide the feedback. We really do want to see, what people think about these concepts, these alternatives. Especially some of the questions that we got about specific locations in terms of safety and crossings. Please highlight those so that we can be sure to address those. I see another question from iPad 2, so I'm going to unmute you. Feel free to ask your question.
All right, hate to be a dog with a bone on this, but this is back to the center lane versus right lane for the HUV lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And with the proposed bus changes, and of course, A, they haven't been adopted, B, they can always be changed, but it's pretty much going to be just I think it was 6 to 8 buses running down the 29 corridor per hour, with the Z8 running, I forget whether it was 6 or 8. And as I recall, and my memory may be faulty here, the other lines were being terminated. So that really, it seems to me that having all the buses run on the right lane, easier for pedestrians to access. I understand your point about cars, carpool cars jockeying around, but having been somebody who stood in the rain with the cars splashing by you, sitting in the center median doesn't really appeal to me. It's hard enough on getting splashed from one side. So
no, listen, these are really great concerns, and this is exactly what we wanted to hear from people that ride the buses and their perspective. I would say, first of all, no final decision has been made. Keeping it in the right hand side is something that is still an open discussion internally to DOT and with State Highway as well. I would also add that in terms of system continuity, you think from Burtonsville all the way down to the transit center. Right now it's very problematic for the buses that are allowed to use the right hand shoulder to weave across the interchange ramps, at the ICC and Briggs Cheney. It's very difficult. So for that reason, we want to start them in the left lane and carry them all the way down. Now, that said, with the managed lane alternative, because the managed lane alternative is not entirely end to end, it's only in certain segments where the bus gets the most speed increases. There are only 2 stations, that are impacted that would be, potentially in. Actually, there's only 1 station that would be potentially a discussion about being in the median or not in the median. So that was Burnt Mills, and so because in Four Corners they're running in the general travel lane. So if it's that much of a concern for pedestrian safety, the buses could simply be prioritized to jump out of the left lane and come over to the right, and then go back in. So all of these are design sub alternatives that that we would explore in engineering design.
Number 2.
Anything else popping up in the chat, Kyle?
No, that's it.
what?
Too close with my hand.
That's gross.
It is.
I think you're on. Here we go. Put Matt back on mute. Well, that seems to be most of the questions. Obviously the conclusion of the meeting doesn't, end the ability to ask questions. Everyone has my email address. Feel free to shoot questions if, as you're looking at the documents, something comes up. As you're trying to seek to answer questions in greater detail, feel free to reach out to us. If it's something that I can't answer, I can definitely shoot it to Paul and the other consultants and get an answer and get it back to you. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to say that, we can conclude the meeting. And I want to thank everyone for for attending. I will also mention before we close, you know, we're likely to do more of these types of meetings going forward, at least for the foreseeable future. And depending on how well they're attended, you know, we may do more of these even once we get past a time where we can meet in person again, or in combination with in-person meetings. If you have thoughts about how the meeting went, you know, please shoot us comments about that as well. We definitely want to make this process, even in a virtual setting, as meaningful as possible. So please give us feedback on that as well. So barring further questions, Kyle, I'm assuming that you don't have anything else? Building?
One actually just came through.
Great.
Has there been any study about how discontinuing the bus services that also go into the neighborhoods affects the neighborhoods?
Discontinuing the bus service. So I believe this is related to the ride-on route proposals. As those proposals were assessed, yes, our ride-on service planners did look and about, you know, which stations or stops would no longer be served, which portions or segments of the routes would no longer be served, and looked at what those impacts would be. So it wasn't just, you know, change the routes with a disregard for how the neighborhoods would be routed. If you do have specific questions about any of the route proposals, you know, I'm not intimately familiar with them, but if you shoot those questions to me, I can get them to the right people at Ride On and get those answered for you. Okay, well, thank you again. I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening, that everyone stays safe, and that hopefully in the near future, we can get back to doing in-person meetings and having face-to-face dialogue. So thank you again. We really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their evening to attend this. And we look forward to hearing your comments and feedback.